Hey, everybody. Welcome to another special episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast. It's morning where I am, but if it's afternoon or night, wherever you are, woohoo! As usual, I get to do the intros of this one because Stevie is not cool enough to be participating on the... Shit. Stevie, what are you doing here?
What did I do?
The opening episode for the opening sequence for every one of these has been that you're not cool enough to be on these episodes, and then you go and show up and ruin it, Stevie.
I'm making it cooler, man. That's why no one likes to watch these without Stevie.
Oh.
Just watch it blow up now, man.
We'll see about that, Stevie. You're the featured book of the month, but don't get ahead of yourself.
Well, I'm shirtless this time, so maybe no one will show up.
You mean you have a shirt on? Shirtless means off.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm so used to saying I'm shirtless. I'm shirt on.
Shirtful. That's
Shirtful.
the one you're looking for.
You know what? Moving out, I left every single one of my workout shirts at home. I don't know what was going on with me. Every single one. All
And
my nipple showers.
Yeah, your mom's been using them like as thread to sew the rest of your clothes. You get these little tiny singlets that no one should be wearing, Stevie.
You're probably right. I feel sorry for people who are at the gym with me.
That's true. And this is how you know it's a fantasy podcast, because we talk about literally anything else.
Nipples are already on the show, so what's
true.
next?
We're off to a roaring start. We are here today with such an awesome panel of guests to talk about the one thing that we all love, magical weapons. It's a classic in fantasy novels. I got one, you got one, pretty much everybody's got one. So we're going to start off by introducing our guest. The first guest obviously needs no introduction because he's my co-host and, as he loves to say, co-presenter, Stevie Collier. We've got the awesome Eric. Eric, say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Eric. I don't know why they invited me. Most of these people seem like real authors. I write fantasy when I'm awake, I think, pretty much all the time. Working hard on the third series.
That's awesome. And today we're going to be talking about your, I can never remember the name of the series. Immortality and Chaos?
Yes.
I got it right. Very cool. Jeff.
Yeah. Okay. My name is Jeff Kohanek. And, my author name is Jeffrey L. Kohanek. Anyway, my published books are all in the same world, called Asalia, Runes of Asalia, Wardens of Asalia. And, I write when I can, and I come in these podcasts when somebody is crazy enough to invite me.
Very cool. And so in the Wardens of Asalia series, we're going to be talking about a pretty awesome magical weapon, right?
Yeah. Actually, probably a little bit of both, because the weapon is in both series. Yeah.
Ooh, exciting. All right, Tora.
Hi. Hi, I'm Tora Moon, and I write fantasy and all types of fantasy. I do urban as well as epic. And in my series, Legends of Flerheim, the women use awesome weapons to destroy monsters.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to say destroy men, and I was really nervous.
No. The men shapeshift.
That's right. I remember that episode the episode we had you on, and we read that really interesting scene with it was a dragon, right?
No.
Or no.
Wolf.
There you go. That's the one. Close enough, right?
Close enough.
Close enough. Hey, Brian, you made it.
Yeah, I forgot my wife has a laptop. It kind of sucks, but
There you go. You're here. Go ahead and say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Brian.
Well done.
Best introduction
Oh,
yet.
great.
No, my name is Brian D. Anderson, a D for a double dose of my poor writing. I wrote a bunch of series: Godling Chronicles, Dragonbane, The Veil, Akiri, and I got a tour release coming out in January called The Sorcerer's Song. First book's The Bard's Blade. That's
very, very cool. I saw the cover for that one. It looks amazing.
Oh yeah, Felix did a fantastic job, right?
Felix never does not do a fantastic job. All of his stuff is awesome. And Angel, do you have any magic weapons in your books?
I can't tell you about them. I'm not here to talk about you guys. I'm here to talk about everybody else. You guys got some awesome. And I got Stevie one on the way when he sends it.
You mean this one right here?
Yes.
So green and fiery.
Yes,
That's cool. All right, well,
today.
I'm an epic fantasy author, but I've only got the short available on the website. But it's coming. The
That's
first one
awesome.
will come out this summer.
And it is an awesome short, so everybody go read it. Eric, why don't you start off by telling us about your magical weapon?
All right, let's see if I can do this. I don't want to give any spoilers away because it turns out to be quite a lot different from what you think it is by the fifth book. But essentially, two of my main characters end up in a cavern underground, and they find this ancient wall down there, and sticking out of it is something that they didn't expect. And when he pulls it free, despite the warnings coming from, they've been led there by voices in their head, and then there's these warnings saying, don't do it, don't do it. And he pulls out this weapon, and it's an axe, but it looks like it's made of obsidian, and it looks almost like a creature. It's been carved to look like one with an eye on one side. And when he uses it for the first time, he ends a siege by he doesn't know what it does, but he has this feeling, and he walks over to the wall of the city that they're besieging and just lets go. And it turns out the axe just slices through stone. It doesn't just slice through it, but it just kind of shatters it and ends the siege. And so that's sort of the beginning of the book, because from there he's able to take the crown from the Mad King. And that's sort of the beginning of the whole story, because when he pulled the axe from the wall, he unknowingly cracked a prison that had been built thousands of years ago. And that's sort of the setup for the whole story.
Yeah, I remember that scene, and I was like, finally a siege is broken in the coolest way ever. He just walks up and boom, brings down the wall. It was awesome. Like a modern fantasy retelling of the Jericho battle.
Yes. Yeah, just blow the horn and all comes down. Or if you have a magic axe. So
exactly.
It's not technically magical, so I don't know why you had me here, but it is pretty darn cool, I think.
I was pretty sure it was going to be something like way more evil than. Well, I mean, it's number one, it's black, which in color symbology, black can never really be a good thing. Yeah. And then he pulled it from some magical place underground. It's going to be something bad, which I'm really excited to look forward to finding out. I'm sort of in the middle of book 2, so
it has its good and bad sides. I like the idea of anything. I think I played too much D&D. The DM would give you a weapon, and there was no way it didn't have a downside. The was the more you knew, something bad's going to happen if I use this too much.
Yeah. That's pretty classic. All right, Stevie, tell us about the Jigsaw Blade and all the Bizarre Blades, I guess.
Sure, definitely. So the Bizarre Blade series, actually, I didn't think about it this way, but two of my reviewers said it was kind of like Pokemon trading cards, which I guess was pushed into my subconscious mind because my poor parents spent like thousands of dollars on those Pokemon cards when I was little. And so the Bizarre Blades are kind of like, they're scattered all over the world. Each have different characteristics, different abilities, different personalities, and some are better than others. Some are completely useless. Some are just for fun, and you can only be connected to one. So I was walking with my dog one day, and there's all these books with all these amazing swords. King Arthur's sword, we have the Highlander sword. We have, I think if you pick up any fantasy book, there's going to be a magical sword. Which is great, which is fine. That's what people come to expect. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. So I chose, I was walking with my brother, and I was like, what if we had a sword that was completely useless, just complete garbage, rusted, and it stayed that way for the entire book? This crappy sword stayed that way for the entire book. And at the end of the book, it's a sword. It's a sharp sword, but it doesn't do anything amazing like, pulling thunder from the sky. It doesn't create earthquakes. It doesn't create massive tornadoes. It doesn't pull the brain from the nose out of somebody that it touches. It doesn't do anything like that. All it is a rusted gray sword that has chainsaw teeth on it, and it doesn't want to listen. It's incredibly heavy, and just not only that, it's very rude too. So it will just not listen to you. So I'm going to lose this battle today, but I'm going to lose happily because that's what I wanted. I wanted people to read them like, man, that sword freaking sucks. And the thing is, the main character is stuck with it. He's stuck with it. It's kind of like when Ash Ketchum gets Pikachu. Pikachu doesn't listen to Ash. So I feel like no one here has watched Pokemon except
To be fair, to be fair, one of my favorite scenes of the Jigsaw is when he's alone in the desert and he learns how to climb by just basically having the chainsaw drag him up the tree. I was like, that is the weirdest, most Stevie thing in any book ever.
Yeah, and he's getting frostbite at the time because it's so cold there, and he also has to. Oh, there's a lot going on in that scene. I did a lot of research with, because there's a blizzard coming by that point in the story. So, but yeah, he has to figure out how does he use this useless blade to live when he only has a couple hours to live.
Yeah,
that he can't even lift.
Yeah, and he can't even lift. The guy is
Christmas tree from a Charlie Brown Christmas. I don't know why.
Actually, it's that's how I would picture it too. But yeah, this guy, the main protagonist is probably 120 pounds soaking wet. He's like incredibly skinny, no muscle, and basically got dragged into a tundra with almost broken legs. So, and his hands are almost broken too because the vibrations of the sword. I don't know if you've ever hit a baseball wrong with a bat and it sends vibrations through your arms. Does anyone play baseball?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if you hit a baseball wrong, it will feel like you've destroyed your fingers and your arms. So that's what it's like.
And I think at one point the chainsaw sword actually just drags him around on the ground, needs to get somewhere quickly, and it just drags him around. And of course, it's a young adult book, so Stevie didn't talk about the road rash that he would have gotten.
No.
He cleverly neglects to include that, but it was just such a funny visual of this kid being dragged around by the sword,
which is a perfect. It just shows off the personality of Jigsaw. It doesn't really care. Yes, it wants to help its owner, but it's going to do so in the easiest way possible for it, and not really. And the more further on the books, the partnership between Finn and the Jigsaw blade grows. But yeah, the big problem I had with that though is I was writing. I was like, oh my god, Jigsaw is a tool that you get at Home Depot. So what do I do now? And I said I refuse to change the name of the book because I'm stubborn, and so I named it Jigawa Saw Blade, and then Finn's like, I'm not calling you Jigawa Saw Blade. Let's just call you Jigsaw Blade. So
exactly, classic Stevie. All right, Tora, tell us about your magical weapons.
So my magical weapons, they've figured out how a metal alloy called Hellstrom that accepts magic and directs the magic of the women. And the reds are the fireworkers, and they feed their fire into the blade in order to cut the tough hides of the monsters. And the new monster that shows up, the only way that they figured out how to kill it is by driving the blade into the head and feeding so much fire magic into it that it blows up. And the blade is, they call it a halberd. And I based it a little bit on the Japanese naginata. So it's a staff with a blade on the end that women used in Japan.
Very cool. And so now let me get this. Let's see if I get this. It's the blade itself is inert, and they channel the magic into the blade, or is the blade like a repository that stores the energy and then lets it loose, or it's just like a channel for them to put the magic through?
It's a channel for them to put the magic through, and it's very sharp. So even when they're not using their magic, and it's connected to them through blood. So there's a blood ritual that they have to go through in order to use that blade. So you can't just drop the blade and pick it up and use it with somebody else.
Oh, so but once it's bonded to the user, it's bonded to them for life.
Yes.
Okay, so it's not like they have to do blood magic every time they want to use it.
No, just that first bonding is when they get their blade. And at the beginning of the story, only reds are using the halberds because they're the only ones that are fighting. And by the end of the first story, they're learning that the other women, the other talents with other colors, can also feed magic into their blades, and they need all of those in order to defeat the monsters.
Very cool. Very cool. Jeff, what about you? Tell us about your magical weapons.
Okay. So starting in Runes of Vesalia, my first series, one of the main characters, his father was like a champion swordsman, and in a contest, he won this blade, this just masterly crafted blade, and then in the following years, he kind of grew to become like a legend as a captain in this army for the Empire. Anyway, part of it was because of the blade, but nobody really understood it. They just called this guy the Calm, and that was kind of his legend. When he was older, he gifted the blade to his son, who was like 19, and has a lot of the same physical, attributes. So he's just naturally like a big, strong guy who's agile and quick.
Oh, hey, me.
So anyway, he uses this blade, and they end up coming across the return of like these monsters. These monsters that have been banished for hundreds of years. And the thing is, these giant monsters that eat people, they're kind of twisted, scary. They're called banshees. The reason they're called banshees is when they scream, everybody who hears their scream is debilitating fear. So they lock up and they don't even fight back. So these banshees just like tear through armies like nothing because they're screaming and nobody's fighting back. Well, this blade, this special blade called Silencer, it has flutes on the blade itself. And when you swing it, it kind of whistles. Anybody who hears that, it kind of counteracts that fear and instills courage in them. So this character becomes central to this fight, because whenever he swings the blade, he basically frees anybody around him from the spell. So that's in the main series. Now there's history to it. So what I did as part of the history for everything I had going on in the world, I wrote a prequel novella, well, actually full novel, that's 400 years in the past. And it talks about how this army was actually created by a bunch of power-hungry, we'll call them wizards, right? And what they did is they changed men. These are definitely spoilers. They changed men into like these giants and gave them this ability to scream, and create this fear. Well, what happens is when this magic is basically enchanted into a person or any living thing, it twists them and it changes them, and they become they lose their minds. It's kind of like zombies with special powers, right? The blade was crafted by a particular wizard at that time, specifically to fight against this army. So this is 400 years in the past. Well, long story short, the army ends up getting banished and they're like gone for a while. And then they come back in my Rune series, and that blade becomes a central, part of the fight. So it's kind of like a subtle power where people didn't even realize that it was enchanted. They just thought it was a great sword for centuries, and you don't figure it out till in the middle of the series. The main characters figure it out, and other things happen from there. Yeah.
So tell us the ending. Tell us how it ends.
Since you've given us most of the story.
What's that?
Since you've given us most of the story, what's the ending?
Oh no, there's so much more. Because those are very small side elements to what's happening in the whole main story.
Yeah, very good. All right, Brian, tell us about your magical weapon.
My magical weapon. All right. It's called a P37, and it's called a P37 because that was the number that came to my mind and the letter that came to my mind. So it's a P37. It's a handgun, but it's a magical handgun. The series is called The Veil, and what The Veil is kind of based on the video RPGs like Final Fantasy, Tales of stuff like that. And you notice there's always some sort of magical gun.
Yep.
And with this particular one, it's only able to be carried by the Royal Guards, which the protagonist is a exiled, disgraced Royal Guard. And you have to have this thing called a Vex crystal. It's surgically inserted into your chest to operate the gun. Now, there are mages and their magic and all that. So basically what it does, it has what's called a mana chamber, which the crystal enables you to channel mana into the mana chamber and do all sorts of really cool spells. There's like one you could shoot a mist out, and if anybody runs through it within like 60 seconds, it melts the flesh off their bones. Mostly he just uses it just shooting, mana out the barrel. But it can use do concussion grenades and stuff like that. And it depends on what he channels in there, what comes out the other end. But the more powerful the spell, it causes a lot of pain because it has to channel it actually through the crystal. And the crystal itself is the source of the power. So he can't, without the gun, he can't wield magic or anything like that. So like I said, this whole world is set. I kind of made it a what you would expect to see, the types of characters you would expect to see in an RPG. Especially Final Fantasy VII. I kind of borrowed a lot of those sort of archetype characters. You have the brooding protagonist with a dark past. You have this one guy that you're not sure whose side he's on. The little sprightly thief, all those kind of characters. So I thought, why not use a weapon that you almost always see in these kind of video games. So I think it was best described as a novelization of a game that's never been invented.
That sounds pretty cool. It sounds like a lot of fun. And for those of you who have read my books, you'll recognize Soul Hunger, the sentient demonic dagger that drives the hunter to kill. So basically, breaking it down, which the hunter finds out later on in the books, the dagger itself is nothing. It's just sort of the conduit through which the blood and magic is absorbed, and it's the gemstone, which is sentient. So basically, these gemstones are made through a ritual from the souls of the hunter's ancestors on his demonic side. So they're just demon souls. And so they've bonded with him, and it's this voice in his head that drives him to kill. But what's cool is that I can kind of play with it because it's a gemstone that contains the soul, and the weapon itself is just the channel. I can create all kinds of weapon. Like in the first book, the hunter only has a dagger, but the demon bad guy, he's got this badass longsword. So he's fighting it, and he's got no idea that it's so powerful until it touches him, and it nearly kills him. Just like an instant cut nearly kills him, drains all of his power out of him. And so then I get to do that later on in the other series. Some of the other weapons and stuff that I introduced, they've got gemstones set into the hilt or into the cross guard or in the pommel, or if I want to get creative with axes and spears and stuff, I can go that route. Basically, it's just the weapon that's the conduit for the magic that inserts the dagger into the person's heart, gives the gemstone the ability to tap into that life force and suck it out of them. And as we find out in the book, it's connected to the heart of the evil god. So every time the hunter kills, it's giving him, say, 10% of the power, and 90% of the power that the stone generates goes to the evil god. So he knows that every time he uses it, it's one step closer to bringing that god back to life and destroying the world. So it's this fun struggle between, okay, he's got this voice in his head that's really his only companion, so he hates it, so he kills to silence it, but then he misses it, so he kind of lets it come back a bit, sort of like this addiction codependence. But then the more he uses it, the closer the world comes to destruction. So he can't use it, but he needs to, but he hates it, but he wants to. And so it's this weird vicious cycle that's just this internal struggle that really the whole book is about. The hunter, or the whole series is this guy's internal struggle with sort of the basic tenets of right and wrong. Am I doing what's right, even though it could ultimately lead to the wrong thing, or am I going to do the wrong thing for the right reasons? It's a fun look at magic. And
does it feel like a drug?
It thing sort of made me think of myself.
There is an element of drug to it, the codependence, in the sense like addiction is not only physiological, it's often psychological. People come to depend on whatever their substance is. So he feels this dependence on the voice, and when he doesn't have it, he feels very alone. But he's an outcast because he's an assassin, so he doesn't have anybody around him he can talk to, and this voice is kind of the only thing that gets him. Obviously, it's a demon, so it's just an absolute shithead. But there is that element of dependence and addiction. So I found it a really interesting struggle to write. it was probably the most interesting part of creating this character for me.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I hope so. But I have to ask you guys, what is the magical weapon of all, like in all fantasy, that stands out to you the most? The one that just popped to my head, and I don't know how much magic there is in it, is Aragorn's sword. I don't know how much magic there is to it, but the fact that it, chopped off Sauron's hand, and they go through the whole reforging thing. That's one of the most iconic weapons in fantasy. I don't know if it counts as magic. What other kind of magical weapons in fantasy have you guys like, oh my god, this is my favorite, or this is awesome?
Yeah. Dragnapur, Stephen Erickson.
Oh yeah. Hell yeah.
The Fallen. Dragnapur. So this weapon was created by a god. And whenever you kill someone with it, it sucks their soul into it, where they end up being one of many pulling this giant cart across an endless landscape while some sort of swirling, horrible storm of chaos chases them. And they know that if that catches them, it'll be the end of everything, but they can't free that. They're all chained to this cart and they can't get away. And it's actually getting closer because the guy who holds the sword doesn't want to kill people with it, knowing it will put them in this eternal hell. And yet, if he doesn't, something terrible will happen. It's just one of many fascinating thousands of things that Erickson came up with in his books, and I love it so much. I wish I would have thought of it.
Like from Sanderson's, that how it's like his weapon sits there, flies around and talks to him, and then when it's time to be a weapon, is a weapon.
Oh, the shard blades.
Yeah. I was like, when he revealed that, I was like, wow, that was cool.
That was cool. My favorite is from Wheel of Time, Kalendor, the glass sword. I always thought that was really cool.
Is that one that Rand has?
Yeah, and they find out late in the series that it has a flaw, and it can only be used. I don't want to do a spoiler. Well, it can only be used in a certain way, but it's
Wheel of Time, man. If someone hasn't read Wheel of Time, they're either not gonna read Wheel of Time, that's like.
You only find out in book 12 or something, 13, what the flaw is.
Exactly. And again, by the time they slog through 8 million pages and get there, they're not going to remember.
Can you imagine somebody calling you up and saying, hey, the Wheel of Time, we want you to finish it.
Oh, geez. It's like the scariest and most exciting thing at the same time.
It's like if Tolkien didn't write The Return of the King and somebody gave you a call. You want me to do what? You got to give Sanderson props for that one, man. That was ballsy.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. Stevie, what about you? Oh, Tora, you looked like you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Well, mine isn't necessarily from fantasy, other than I can consider it sci-fi fantasy, is the lightsabers from Star Wars.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Right?
Yes, those are magic. I don't care what you say. Those are magic, and the Jedis do magic.
Well, if you believe Asimov, magic is just technology that we're not advanced enough to understand. So we'll call it magic because even though we can understand it, it's magical. And the truth is that I would say that for most people, lightsabers is 95% of what made them fall in love with Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I mean, so for me, the biggest disappointment of the new Star Wars movies, I don't have a problem with the story. I don't have a problem with anything. I just don't like the fact that there's no awesome Star Wars. I mean, lightsaber battles. You got that kind of half-assed one in the throne room in movie 2. There was that little tiny scene at the end of movie, of The Force Awakens. But none, like, we were spoiled by the, movies 1, 2, and 3.
I really like the one where the lightsaber is actually a bow.
Right?
Yeah, where it's double-sided. The red guy.
That was awesome. Yeah, see,
that one was awesome.
No matter what people say.
Understood.
What was that?
Like Darth Maul was just misunderstood.
Oh, no matter like Darth Maul isn't what people complain about. Darth Maul was awesome. He's exactly what he needed to be.
Well, you have these guys that come down, they blow up government property.
Government property.
They assassinate the duly elected leader. The rebels nothing but a bunch of terrorists, man.
Yeah.
Good grief.
Stevie, what about you? What would be your favorite magic weapon from fantasy?
Well, the lightsaber was kind of stolen, so I won't say the lightsaber again. Kind of a fan. So I was like struggling to find something else, and mine would be from not fantasy but from anime, and I don't know if anyone here has watched Soul Eater, but it is about these young people who have to kill monsters in order to grab their souls, and then they give that soul to their weapon, which literally eats it, and their weapons turn to people, and then they grab this like little ball and they actually chew it and swallow it. And this one guy has a really bad attitude. I mean, he is a douchebag with a capital D, and way worse than Jigsaw. And he turns into a big scythe with an eyeball, and he kills these huge, massive demons, and then he just swallows their soul. And I just thought it was so cool. But yeah, mine sounded kind of weird compared to everyone else's.
Yeah, it makes you feel better. That's one of my daughter's favorite anime.
Is Soul Eater? Is Soul Eater?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, that's great.
Someone in the
He knows all about it, but
someone in the live comments, they mentioned Excalibur. I just finished watching the new Legend of King Arthur one.
But what does it do other than make you a king?
Well, so I mean, like every variation or every version of Arthur has their own thing. The one in the Legend of King Arthur.
In the Thundercats, it actually beat Lion-O's sword. Nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about, do they?
Yes, I do. I'm old enough. I get you.
You remember that episode too, don't you?
In the Legend of King Arthur, they had this thing where basically if he gripped the sword with both hands, then he could use its magic, and its magic like sped him up so fast that he could kick ass. And it was great cinematics.
That was an awesome scene.
Yeah. It might not have been, super technically perfect writing, but like that whole movie, it was great cinematics and a lot of fun.
I'll tell you, Excalibur has really stood the test of time. That to me is still the best Arthur myth movie of all that was made. What, 1981? It's still awesome.
Yeah, I think that Excalibur is kind of the original magical weapon, isn't it?
One of the originals. And except for you go back even further to the Greek myths, and they have a lot of magical weapons.
Oh yeah.
Like
the arrow of Cupid is a magical weapon.
Okay.
Thor's hammer, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you've got Thor's hammer, which is from Norse mythology, which predates Excalibur.
What about Zeus's lightning bolt? Zeus is not Zeus's. Zeus's lightning bolt.
Zeus or Jupiter, either one. Zeus is Greek, Jupiter is Roman. And they used lightning rods. And lightning rods was a symbol of the gods' magic.
Really?
That's one of the ways that they differentiated between gods and mortals is through the lightning bolts. That's why a lot of the gods are shown with a lightning bolt.
I just wrote that into my...
it's the magic of nature.
What I was thinking about, like I feel like Excalibur is the first magical weapon where its power exceeds its wielder. Like Zeus, right? He flings his lightning bolts, but there's Zeus and his lightning bolts. Thor and his hammer. Thor's hammer is super powerful. But in again, I don't know. I'm the wrong person to say this, but I feel like in most mythology and ancient stories, it was the character themselves that had all the power, and then their magic, their weapon was sort of the channel for their power, or it was a symbol of their power, or it conveyed power, but it was them themselves that was more powerful. Whereas in Sword in the Stone, or in the original Arthur legend, it was like this little boy who couldn't do anything pulled this stone out of the sword, and it conveyed all the power to him.
Well, it's like the
Actually, the original author meant it was Galahad who pulled the sword from the stone. It was not Arthur. You had to go through a maze in order to find the Grail. In order to become worthy of that, he had to be able to pull the sword from the stone. That is a big mistake people make in the original Arthur myths.
Interesting.
I didn't know that. Sorry, I'm going to have to run now. Thanks for having me on, and I'll have to watch the rest of this when I get back. I've got an appointment I got to go to now.
Thanks so much
See you later, Eric,
for being on. Everybody, go check out the Immortality and Chaos series. I'm halfway through book 2, and it's awesome. You won't regret it.
Good day.
I do think you can trace a lot of the what we consider fantasy magical weapons back to Excalibur for sure, and what honored fantasy is. You know, that is like a mortal wielding a godlike weapon, and Arthur is just a mere mortal. So yeah, I think you're right about it being very, very original to fantasy.
It's one of the original fantasy stories is the story of Arthur and the Round Table and all of the knights.
So I have a question for everybody, and that is, what was the hardest part about writing your magical sword?
Or weapon.
Or weapon, yeah, sorry. Well, I'll start. For me, it was, how do you solve problems with a sword that doesn't want to listen? So that was my biggest, so it's kind of like writing myself into a locked room. Andy and I've talked about this, and it's how do I beat the final boss with a sword that A, sucks, and B, has a bad attitude, and C, the wielder is incredibly weak. And that was the biggest struggle. But I think one of the strongest points of the book was how the protagonist defeats this horrible person with I would say half luck, half. I don't want to give anything away, but that was the hardest part for me. Yeah.
There wasn't anything hard about coming up with a magic gun.
Is this the Tor book you're talking about?
No, with the Tor book, actually, I do have a magic weapon in the Tor book. It's called a V6 dagger, and it's endowed with death magic, and just the slightest cut will kill you. It's an assassin's blade, black blade with a black handle, black sheath, definitely assassin's weapon. Very valuable. It's not, but you know what? The thing about the Bard's Blade, it's a character-driven fantasy. Yes, there's magic and there's stuff like that, but it's not really centered around that. I guess it sort of is and it isn't. Very different from my other work. But there is a magical weapon. It's where you just the slightest scratch will kill you. And
is it dangerous to the wielder?
If you kill with it, it gives you partial immunity. I can't remember. Damn, I can't even. I shouldn't even said that much. This book hadn't even come out. It hadn't even come out yet. I shouldn't be really saying much about this. I'm gonna get a call here in about half an hour.
Oh no! Yeah.
Hey, if anybody at Core is watching this podcast, it's totally worth it.
Yeah.
But no, it's a cool weapon. It's a lot is centered around it, but it's not at the same time. It's more centered around the person who's wielding it more than the weapon itself. So the origin of the weapon is not really crucial. How it was made is not really crucial. I could put that kind of background in there, but it really doesn't do anything for the story, so I didn't. So, but the gun is cool. I like the gun a lot. It can blow up buildings. Unfortunately, the only real monster in the Vale is immune to magic, so it doesn't do a hell of a lot of good.
Now, yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious as to how you came up with the idea of flutes. Obviously, not real flutes, but like grooves and holes and stuff to channel the sound. How did you come up with that idea?
So I don't know. Well, I guess from my perspective, I needed something to fight this fear, right? And so what it had to do is it had to affect the people around you. And there are a lot of things that make noise when air moves past them, right? So that kind of became natural. Now the trick was, how do I make it so these people don't really understand that the blade is enchanted until they get into a certain situation and they realize, wow, that it breaks the spell. It breaks the spell. So, and then them figuring that out, right? Just kind of like putting two and two together. That was the only tricky part. The rest was, I have an engineering background, so like figuring out how physics and all that stuff work, that's part of what I do. And that's why you'll see pretty much every book I ever write, there are people inventing things and enchanting things and coming up with new ways to combine magic and science. So this is just another part of that.
So you do hard magic systems?
Yeah, I do. So, like Sanderson, you bring him up, he's a big influence, but for the most part, I treat magic as a science we just haven't figured out.
Yeah.
Now I will say that in my current series, the books are released, and even in the next one, there are only certain people who can do it, right? So some of it comes down to some sort of natural ability, talent, but then you have to figure out how to combine, knowledge and what's been discovered in the backside to make that magic work. For instance, like rune-based magic, that's what my Celia books use. And the people that can channel the magic basically power these runes, and they augment something. So it's, say if you have a rune applied to a person, and that rune is reduced gravity, you apply it to them, and they'll float up in the air, right? And you can do the same thing to an inanimate object.
Very, very cool. All right, we've got our last question because we're almost out of time.
Well, I didn't get to answer.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
How dare you, Andy?
How dare you? The hardest part for me writing with the weapon was to figure out why the women with the other talents couldn't use the Hellbrock, and how to make it so that they could once they started fighting. And then in the new series that I'm writing, they use crystal swords and daggers to kill the demons because metal won't. So I had to figure out how they do that with magic.
Very interesting.
That's awesome. But can I also point out that Angel looks like one of those people back in the day where you're like, connecting you now, sir. They take out the little pin and they put in another one. I don't even know how that thing works. My grandma did that. That's what you look like, Angel.
Well, I moved my stuff and I can't find my actually wireless one.
An operator.
I'm sorry, these are my
operator. Yeah, a telephone operator.
She's our customer support.
I retired from Bell South, so yeah.
Andy's old enough that he had to use an operator.
Excuse me, Angel. My cable went out. Can you please fix it?
Hey, nowadays, if you look up on YouTube landline, kids with landlines, they don't know how to use landline phones. The ones where you pick up and put to your ear. It's insane. Or the one where you turn.
Yeah, the rotary
one.
Rotary
phone.
phone.
I used to play with that as a kid, and my grandma wouldn't have any calls because I'd have the phone out of the thing, and I'd just be playing with it, and then I'd leave it off. Anyway, Andy, what was your last question?
First I was to say, Angel, you haven't talked a whole lot, so
Well,
tell us about magical weapons. Your favorite magical weapon?
My favorite, Stevie's. I got to give props to for creativity. But there's one.
Andy, get your spray bottle. Sorry.
There's one in Jim Hines' book, and it's like the books. You can choose anything you want. You can reach into a book. It's called Libriomancer, and you can reach into any books that are in the library. But the elders, they've sealed some of the books because, like, the weapons will be too powerful. It's also like a science of how you reach in, because you can't just reach in to like a vampire scene, because you might like brush up against their fangs, or what was the other thing? You can't like, steal like Harry Potter's wand, because even if you get it out, like if you don't know how you use it, it's not going to be any good. So that is really cool that you can have just any book in the library that's not sealed, but it's like a science of how you take it in and out and how you use it and everything. That was really neat.
That's pretty cool.
Kind of reminds me of Time Scoop from that short story. They made a movie out of it. Paycheck.
Oh yeah.
When he had the Time Scoop.
I've never heard of that one.
Well, it's probably
Ben Affleck was in it.
yeah. Is it 10 years old?
It was based off a short story, and the short story is really, really good, but very different from the book.
Well, Angel, I was surprised you said the growth blade wasn't your favorite.
Well, you didn't do much about the growth blade.
I think if I had done much of the
short story about your growth blade.
If I would have done much of the growth blade, I think I would have been laughed out of the fantasy world. For sure.
Oh, but you said you want to break out your personality and not hold back, and I want to see what you got.
I think, even psychopaths have to hold back a little bit, like just give them 90%, but that 10% where you're chopping off heads, just hold that back.
Stevie, for those who don't know, why don't you tell us about the growth blade?
So the growth blade is one of the most fantastic, most legendary, mythical blades out there in the world of the bizarre blades. Kingdoms fought over it for years, and these kingdoms were led by male kings who had smaller members than usual, with the idea that the growth blade could grow any part of them as big as girthiest as they wanted. And we're talking thousands of pounds, thousands of people died in the wars to finally get this girth blade. And finally, a very, very, very brave and heroic king with less, he thought he was less of a man than actually what he was, finally grabs this growth, call it the girth blade. I should have called it the girth blade.
You made a really awesome name though.
And
Freudian slip.
What he didn't know was that the growth blade did not grow anything. It just shrunk everything. And it was permanent. And so there is the legend of the growth blade, which is one of the jokes told throughout the Kingdom of the Bizarre Blade. So, but it was a true blade.
This is the caliber of writing that you can expect from Stevie's Bizarre Blade series.
Just go look at some of the 2-star reviews. You'll figure out. Figure out what the book's about. Seriously, I don't know if you go look at my blurb. I actually use the 2 stars in my marketing now, and it worked so well. Some of the 2 stars are funnier than the book, I swear.
That's awesome. All right, so the last question before we run off. If you could have any magical weapon and magical power like combo, what would it be?
Not the growth blade.
I second that.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Give me a second, Andy.
I'd just be a Jedi.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. A lightsaber with the Force. That's a pretty awesome thing.
Why is everyone stealing that from me?
I think Thor's hammer would be pretty darn cool.
That would be
you
cool.
could fly with that.
Would you be able to pick it up? Does that goes without saying?
You'd have to, otherwise it wouldn't do me any good.
You just put it in your room. Just have Thor put it in your room, and it'd be like a centerpiece.
Yeah, it'd be like, hey, come in here. Look at this thing. I can't move.
So you start stubbing your toe on it. You're like, Thor, please go get this shit out of my house. Oh man! Someone else go. I want to answer this question.
Go ahead, Tora.
I've been trying to think, and the lightsaber and being a Jedi would be on top of the list.
I don't know. You can have it too.
I can have it too. Yeah, there were female Jedis. Yeah, some sort of magical sword that I could throw fireballs.
That's cool. You know what I was thinking of? I was thinking of Clay Cooper's shield from Kings of the Wild. Something like that, like sort of an unbreakable shield that, maybe it even had like protective sort of spell around the user. So like something like that more defensive than offensive, I think might be more my speed. Granted, a giant magic axe would also be my speed, so I could go the route of Thor's, the new weapon from Thor 3,
Ragnarok. Yeah.
whatever that the name of that weapon is. Could go for that too.
Okay, I know my favorite, and it has 10 seconds in the fifth and final book, and it is the it's kind of like the God Blade. I never named it, but it was a blade that made you all powerful. It made you like a demigod. It made you incredibly handsome, charismatic. You got your way, whatever, and you were just this amazing philanthropic person. You were just an amazing person. And my gnome Wackadoodle, he's blind. He knocks it over a cliff, and no one gets it. and he's blind and insane, so he doesn't know what he's done. But we hear about this amazing sword, and boom, it's gone. So I think that would be the blade. And the cool part about it is you do get to keep like your personality, so it's not like it just changes you. So that would probably be the blade I wanted. Kind of like saying Shazam, and you become this person when you grab the blade. So, y'all guys didn't know I knew about Shazam, did you? The movie came out, so it's unfair.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, we are officially almost out of time, so why don't we all go around and tell just a few sentences about our books, where to find them, starting with Stevie.
Hi, I'm Andy Peliquin. I'm the author of the Hero of Darkness series.
Wouldn't be the first time you claim credit for my book.
I'm 7 feet tall, and I'm known as Godzilla in Japan. And I'm the owner of the Growth Blade. No. No, my name is Stevie Collier. I am the hilarious, or the person who thinks he's funny, which is probably means I'm not funny. I am the author of the Bizarre Blade series, and you can get that on Amazon or go to steviecollier.com. But I am most famous for my awesome social media. So find me on Facebook.com, Collier's Conquerors. I'm on, what am I on, Andy? Instagram.
I don't know.
Yeah, you'll find me. Just look up Stevie Collier. You will certainly find me. So thank you for letting me, Andy. Thank you for letting me on my own podcast.
You're welcome. It's good to have you here.
Yeah.
See you tomorrow, Stevie.
Yes. Oh yeah.
On time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Wait, what?
You're up.
Me? Okay. Yeah, I'm Jeffrey L. Kohanek. I have a couple series out. Runes of Asalia. Actually, it's inside a box set called Heroes of Asalia. Comes with an extra book. 99 cents right now on Amazon. Just saying. Also, I have Wardens of Asalia, the following series, and I'm releasing a new series this fall called Fate of Wizardoms. And what's a wizardom? It's basically a kingdom run by a wizard. And they tend to be kind of power-hungry, not very nice people.
Is it like Fates of Wizardom of Asalia? Because I feel like that would sort of be the title you had to go with.
No, it's a new series. New setting, new rules, new magic, all that stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah, and you can find me. I have a website, jeffreylkohanek.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter. And that's about it.
Go check him out. He's a Zelda dude. He's got to be awesome. Brian's an FF guy. I mean, we got so many cool people here.
There you go.
Brian, what about you?
Okay, Brian D. Anderson. I got the Goblin Chronicles, The Veil, Dragon Vein, Akiri, which I co-authored with Stephen Saville. You can find all those on Amazon, and all you need to do is look up Brian D. Anderson. You'll find me. I got in January 28th. The Bard's Blade is coming out. If you want some chance at some real cool tour swag that they sent me, go on to Goodreads and put the Bard's Blade on your 2B read, and get for a second chance. Follow my author page, and August 15th, somebody's getting some arcs of the Bard's Blade and some really cool stuff from Tor.
Awesome. Tora.
I'm Tora Moon. I write fantasy. I have complete series, The Legends of Lerheim, out. You can find it on Amazon, Kobo, iBooks, It's Wide, wherever you get your ebooks, you can find it. And I'm currently working on an urban fantasy series called The Sentinel Witches, with witches fighting demons.
Interesting.
Awesome.
That sounds pretty cool. Angel, what about you? Where can we find you?
I'm Angel Hayes. I'm an epic fantasy author. You can find me at www.angelhayes.com or in the Indie Fantasy Addicts group because I'm an indie binger. I have a series coming out. It's a Battle Mage. Oh, hold on.
Wait,
Battleborn
your own
Mage.
Oh, we changed the name. Battleborn Mage.
Very cool.
It used
When
to
is
be
it coming
Battleborn.
out?
The prequel will be available for free by the end of the summer.
Ooh, exciting. We know what we're all going to be reading. All right, and I am Andy Peliquin, author of The Hero of Darkness, Heirs of Destiny, the soon-to-be re-released Queen of Thieves, and the forthcoming Silent Champion series. You can find me on my website, andypeliquin.com, or right here on the Fantasy Fiends podcast tomorrow night with the wonderful Elise Kova. So pop back on tomorrow night at around 5:30 Pacific time, 8:30 Eastern time for another awesome episode of the Fantasy Fiends podcast.
I'll be there too.
Yeah.
And I'll be on the podcast next week, Andy. Whoop, whoop.
That's right. Yeah, that's awesome. Except for the Stevie being here part. I apologize for this, guys. Stevie's here. I can't seem to shake him.
Shake. Ha 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 ha.
And with that, we sign off until tomorrow night. Have a great evening. Goodbye.
Bye.